now time to start fitting this whole tail pan, getting this back end finished up. First thing we need to do is get rid of the old tail pan remnants. We're going to clean all this up. Someone had MIG welded this before, so we can't air chisel that off. We'll really mess up the quarter if we do. So we're just gonna have to grind and get rid of that whole area. And like I pointed out before, whoever put this quarter on didn't really do it right. They tack welded through here. This should be a nice sharp edge, so we'll make sure we make that a nice sharp edge when we put it back together. But for now, let's get grinding both sides, get that all taken down to the quarter itself. We'll throw our tail pan up on there, see how close we are, and see what we need to do with our quarters. We'll get them clamped in place, pull the tail pan back off, then we'll be able to weld our quarter to our trunk floor drop-offs and up here at the back of our trunk floor itself, both sides. And then once that is done, we can pop our tail pan back in and then get it welded on. And then it's just a matter of putting our inner wheel wells that we already have fitted. They're actually sitting right there. They're already fitted, they fit nice. Once this is done, we'll pop them in and then be able to finish this whole back end up, move our way forward. This process is kind of different on each job you do, especially when someone else has been into it. You know, it's factory, you know, there's spot welds and maybe a piece of spot, you know, braze or whatever they used back in the day, maybe a slight MIG weld or two. But anyway, as you're tearing apart, like I said, anything that someone's already been into, there's definitely going to be a lot of grinding involved and just seeing what they did. As we're starting to get this piece out of the way, I can see exactly what they did. They actually left a piece of the old quarter on. I can see the factory spot welds, and they just cut down and sandwiched the new one on, which is really never a good idea. But as you can see, it's starting to get rust in between the two panels already. But we're going to make it right and get all this old junk out. And like I said, as you can see, this piece is in the way, but there is the factory edge of the quarter. So we're going to make sure that stays like that, and we'll drill and spot weld in through here so that it looks like original and not like someone replaced it and didn't know what they were doing. So let's keep chiseling away on this. Get this piece out of the way, and like I said, all this flange needs to come off. Someone put some braze there in the corner. Let's keep chipping away on it. Like I said, it's just whatever you have to do to get these things down to where it needs to be. Might be grinding, might be drilling, might be chiseling. It's just you'll get the feel for it, and you gotta kind of decide as you go. Here's kind of a nice example of what to expect. There was a factory spot weld on the back side here, so I just went in through the inside there with my cutoff wheel and ground that down. There were two straight down. We already made the cut at the quarter. Once we get that done, you can feel it start to move. You can grip it with a pair of vice grips, kind of wiggle that around, break the last couple spots, and then that whole piece comes out. You can see it's a little bit mangled. And you can see exactly where the spot welds. There was one right there, and then again one on that drip edge on the inside. So the quarter, the drip edge, and the tail pan are three pieces that come together right there. It can be kind of fun to you know, figure out how these things went together and what you got to do. It's almost like dissecting these things. You got to figure out where the attachment points are, what you need to do, and gently, it's, I guess, maybe a little bit surgical also, just because we don't want to harm the metal that's there, that's staying. We don't want to create more work for ourselves. And actually now, as I see that, whoever put this quarter on never really welded this. They might have got one or two up through there, but definitely not enough. We'll take and drill down through and again plug weld down through that channel into this drip edge. Yeah, that might not seem like a big deal, but all these pieces together is what makes the strength of the car. So if you have 1 or 2 spot welds through there, you're just not near as strong enough as it should be. GM put them every, I don't know, every inch thereabouts. So we'll definitely do at least that, probably a little bit more than that. But again, it can be fun once you get kind of into the groove of how these things come apart, what you got to do to make them right. It's almost surgical. It's kind of neat. Again, to me, this isn't like really interesting stuff, but some people really wanted to see more detail on how to do this stuff. You know, the views aren't great, but we got to do it anyway, so we might as well film it. So once we start grinding these spots, you can take a screwdriver or a punch or whatever and start working your way. They do have tools, they're called seam busters, but whatever works. We got that bottom one broke loose. We can roll this up. As you can see, we got pretty much that whole weld there. So a little bit of wiggling that around. There it goes. Broke that loose. Now we're up to the next one. It's almost broke loose. You don't want to wrangle it too much to where you're disturbing the metal from behind, because that is the quarter and that's what we're going to use, we're going to keep. We'll put our vice grips on there because that is a little sharp and we don't want to get cut. So I can see that the front half of the piece, or the front piece of the metal is moving around where that weld is ground down, and the bottom is staying nice and true, not moving around too much. So we're safe to kind of put a little bit on there. We'll get our screwdriver back behind here and just give that a little tweak. There it goes. And as you can see, we're just rolling that piece right up. We have that all cleaned down. We'll sand that and hit it with some weld through. We have a little piece left on here that is actually not even really welded. So we'll get that off and get that cleaned up. And we're just about through with this side. I got a few more to go, and then we'll move to that side. And like I said, it's almost whatever you have to do to get the job done, and every job's slightly different. So there is one side all cleaned up. We got a whole piece off. All we have left is the quarter all the way around this gutter. And like I said, we still have to tilt you down so you can see me. Still have to weld this back together because they never really did when they installed the quarter. But this side's actually ready for the tailpan to be fitted. We still have to do that side though. And in the same manner as we did that side, we got this side all cleaned up. We did go ahead and grind all this down. Like I said, this is, I don't know what they did. This is pretty rough, especially for GM quarters. They must have tapped that in or something. If you look at that, that kind of rolls in. It does do that a little bit from the factory, but we'll have to see how that lines up. Definitely gonna have to have a skim coat over that because that's very rough. There's marks all through there, but it's solid metal anyway, and it's clean. So got both sides cleaned up all the way down. Next step is to take that tailpan, fit it up in here, and we can even run a couple bolts through and position that and get it locked in, or just put a couple clamps in there and just see how it fits. So let's grab the tailpan, get it mocked up, and hopefully it fits pretty nice. We're getting this tailpan all set up on the 69 Camaro Pro Mod, not Pro Mod, Pro Touring or Restomod, whatever you want to call it. Getting it all set up, mocked up. As you can see, it fits pretty well. This needs to come out, but I can pull that out. This line's not bad until we get about here, and then it gets a little wide. That's still workable. My phone's going off. This side is also workable. Like I said, none of this is welded yet. We got a bit of a gap there, so we'll have to pull that down and make that work. And as you can see, it kind of looks, we'll probably have to shift over a little bit, but if you look in through here, these holes actually line up, and this hole, it's a tiny bit off. They line up pretty good, so we'll probably have to shift over just slightly. But if you look at these, especially if you look from the inside, it looks like they're really, really far off. But what most people don't realize, here's the factory tailpan that we saved. We still have to take the trunk latch support off. But if you look down in here, this is the way GM put these cars together. You can see how offset that is in that same area. So they weren't perfect from the factory. And actually, if you look down through the bumper access holes here, they aren't even perfectly lined up. So pretty much there's a lot going on this tailpan. You have the quarter to tailpan on either side. You got the quarter to trunk floor drop off. You have the tailpan to inner pan attachment. And then you have all these holes to line up also. So there's a lot going on. In addition to up top, you have your trunk lid gap that kind of gets set by the way you set all this. So definitely key here is prep work, making sure everything's where it needs to be, and definitely take your time, mock it up. You might have to tack, clamp what you can and test fit. You might have to tack weld a little bit here and there and retest fit some, like this inner, and some of this stuff you can't obviously get the tailpan on with a clamp in your way. So you might have to do a small tack there just to hold it. But just take your time. I'll try and walk you through as I go here, but this is always kind of a fight, especially when the quarters have already been on. Obviously we didn't install the quarters, and they're not 100% loose. They're loose here and around here, so we do have some movement, but we don't have total movement of all that. So we'll just have to make work what we have here to work with. Starting to fit here, and we just kind of lift up and push inside there and get it started on its way, both sides. And now we're getting real close down here, so we'll get a clamp and just put something on there, and then just start mocking the rest of it up. It'll probably have to, looks like it needs to come up some. That quarter looks like it's twisted around a little bit. Probably what happened is when we took everything loose, that quarter relaxed this way. So once we get this fitted and get the bottom where the trunk floor drop off is welded to the bottom of the quarter, and really pull that back down, it'll twist that quarter back down in place. All right, we're trying to get this over. So I removed the tailpan. I put a clamp on the quarter itself and kind of pulled down and over, which kind of brings this quarter down and over, kind of rotates it a little bit and gets, I don't know if you could see before, but this flange was way out of shape before. So now we're actually looking pretty good. My clamp's still there, so we can't go all the way tight there, but back here we're looking way better. All the way through here looks good. So I think we're fine there. So probably what I'll do is get rid of this clamp and maybe put another clamp like right here, just in case we have to pull that one. Kind of do the same thing over here. It's not as bad, but I'll try and do the same thing over there and get that to suck up on there, and then we can throw the tailpan back up there and make sure we didn't go too far as right here to right here, because the tailpan still has to fit through there. We may have to hammer and dolly the tailpan a little bit to fit, but yeah, this is looking way better. Like I said, all the way up through here. Looks good. We just got to make sure the tailpan fits. So let's button up this other side in the same manner. We'll put that clamp there, give it a pull down, and clamp it, snug it up a little bit, and throw the tailpan back up on there. We got our setup moved over to this side, and I got this clamp on there in between there, and if I can grab it with this hand, you can actually see exactly what happens as I pull this. This flange comes down right where or the quarter comes down to this drop off and gets real close to where we need to be. But then if you look, you can see how much movement we have here. Hopefully you can see that without me moving. But this whole thing kind of does a twist, a rotate, and it pulls down a bit. So we'll definitely have to make sure that's mocked up with the tail pan before we go too much further. So we've had that tail pan on and off, I don't know how many times, too many times to count. Positioning everything. We got this side welded down through here. We had to move it in and out a couple times, cut a couple tacks off and redo it. This one I have tacked here and a tack here. So I'm gonna go ahead and weld through here. We had to modify the tail pan just ever so slightly, a little bit of trimming here on the sides. So it sits flat. And I think on, yeah, actually it was this side, we had to redo this radius just ever so slightly up top. But like I said, every car is different and you just got to do whatever you need to do to make them work. So let's get this welded up and then we'll get the tail pan thrown back up on there and get some clamps on it and see how we're looking then. Should fit pretty good after this. I am having a little bit of an issue over here. It's touching here, and it's even with the quarter the whole way around. But this stand seems to be welded too far in, so we might have to drill the spot welds. This was already on the floor when we got it, but we may have to drill the spot welds on the stand and move it back a little bit. This sheet metal here should just push back. It's pretty thin, and if you sight down, I don't know if you can see that or not, there is a dip right here. So it comes across the car and kind of dips in, and this from about right here over is in a little bit. So we'll get it thrown, we'll get it clamped back up on there, get maybe a bolt or two here, maybe one here, a couple clamps, and then just see how that stands looking before we do any cutting. Got this whole back mocked up pretty good. I'm fairly happy with the way everything's fitting. Gaps through here look pretty good. This will pull in when we clamp the bottom. Right now I'm just trying to get this center piece and up around the quarters nice and even. Someone at one time when they put these quarters on did pull this in. As you can see, this dip in the quarter is not really there on this side. And this side fits much better. Of course it will go in a little bit too. This side sticks out and you can see that dip in the quarter, so we'll probably have to maybe stud gun that quarter a little bit and get it pulled out. I mean, we could push the tail pan in, but to be correct, this tail pan is correct, we really need to make that quarter match. The bumper hides a lot of that, but that's right at the very edge, bottom edge of the bumper, so we want that to still look good. Again here, that will pull right out when we clamp that. So I think I'm gonna get a couple tacks in through here on the outside here. Make sure that's clamped nice and tight there. We got a clamp here, we'll get a couple tacks that'll keep this thing positioned, and then we can do a little bit more clamping and a little more final fit. Fairly happy with the way the trunk lid's fitting. It's a little wide here and it's touching here, but other than that, the gap is actually pretty decent. It doesn't have the bumpers on it, so that'll actually come up a little bit. So we'll just have to adjust. This is not the trunk lid we're using, but this one fit all right on the last one, so we're just using that for mock-up to get this close. Once we get this welded on, we'll put the real trunk lid on and probably slide it over a little bit. I do believe, well, we can't really change the front to back because the quarters are already there, but I do believe the new trunk lid is a auto metal direct, and it's going to fit a lot nicer than this older replacement one. So we'll see once we get it, but I mean, at this point our quarters are dedicating how this pan pretty much goes on, and like I said, our gaps around the quarters are really pretty nice in place. But I think for now, since we already are at this level, and I have the pole jack here positioning the gap between the rear deck shelf here and the trunk floor is where I want it to be. So we have the inner wheel wells already fitted. We did that a while back, so I just sprayed them up with some weld through primer around all the edges. So we're gonna pop them in, and we'll probably go ahead and put some welds through here, of course through the top part here, and that'll keep, we get the top part here, and this, when we get rid of that pole jack, it'll keep our it'll tie all this in a lot nicer, but it'll also keep this height in where we need it to be. So let's get going on there. We'll get some welding done back there, get these popped in, and we'll catch back up with you. We got these corners here welded, both sides. Nice. That'll keep that from moving around anywhere. We did get, this is where the bumper bolts come through, so we did zip a couple through there. There's a bracket on the inside. Remember, on this side we're probably gonna have to actually drill the spot welds on that bracket and move it back a little bit. I think when they welded that floor, this one somehow got welded in a little bit because we're flush against the quarter here. We're looking good here. Our trunk lid looks good, but yet there's a gap in between this support, trunk floor support to rear tailpan and the tailpan, and it wasn't like that before, and everything else lines up. So not a huge deal. We'll just drill those spot welds and move that straight back. Should be able to get that to look good, and then we'll just re-weld it to the floor. And then inside here where the tag goes, we drilled in the same manner, smaller drill bit, pilot holes, and just cleaned it up with the larger drill bit. We'll go ahead and plug weld these up. We'll move the clamp around, and we'll do a couple at the bottom, and then kind of the same thing over here, and that'll really start to tie this up. And we'll just keep working our way across. We've been rolling along here. We got all the way up the quarter, all the way across the tailpan. Try not to pan too fast. Down this quarter, obviously you already saw that. I got a couple spots here. The rest of it has a slight gap, so I'll have to get my longer clamps, but that's nice and stout there. Yeah, it's looking good. So now we're ready to go ahead and pop one of these. We're gonna start with the passenger side inner wheel well. We'll throw it up in there and see how nice we can make it.